Panthers defeat the Storm 14-6 Sunday night at Core Stadium. I mean, I'd just love to get your thoughts, Smithy. Obviously, you were there at the game.
Yep.
Thoughts on the game and performances from both sides, mate?
Oh, look, I thought it was a cracking game of footy. I know a lot of people sort of made some comments afterwards about the game, or, not many highlights, not much happening. But I just thought it was a really tough game of football that both sides, they were playing high quality football. And in the end, the team that really made the moments count the most was the Penrith Panthers, and they come away with a strong victory. So I think if I look at it this way, Kempy, so if the Melbourne Storm would have rolled out against any other team in the comp, with all due respect, I think they win by 20 or 30.
Oh, yeah.
That's how well they played, right? But when you're facing this Penrith side, who, if you look back over the entire season, and, you and I spoke about this on the show, and many comments from other people in the game as well, looking at Penrith going, oh, geez, they look tired, they look a bit sore, they just don't look like the Penrith of the last couple of years. I'll tell you what, knowing now with, looking at their performance in that grand final, how smart were they in just gearing themselves for that grand final?
Oh,
they all they did, it looked as though they got themselves through the season, as best they could. I know they had some challenges with injuries and whatnot, particularly the key players, but I think what they did was they just set themselves up to be at their peak for that grand final against the Melbourne Storm, and they executed it beautifully.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think, don't get me wrong, I can guarantee every single side was really struggling with injuries, but I think if you went into that dressing room, I reckon they're hanging by a thread, a lot of those boys in that Panthers side. It's funny because I've been saying for quite a while now, and you've been saying it as well, that I just haven't seen Penrith get to their best this year. And when I've said it in front of a few footy fans, they've kind of, they kind of nod their head, but they haven't really gone with me. They're kind of be like, what are you talking about? Like, they're coming second, they're playing good footy. Anyway, we did our season review yesterday. This is where we get all the stats and we look at everything, from top to bottom, comparing years. So this is how much different they were last year. They had less points against, so 312, and they scored substantially more points, 645 last year. So 2023 season, the Panthers scored 645 points, and they had 312 against them. In the 2024 season, they had 580 points scored and 394 against them, which shows you that they did kind of, limp's the wrong word, but for the season, they didn't really hit their straps. They almost just said, look, let's just get to the grand final, and that's where we have our big game.
Yep. Well, mate, hindsight's lovely where you can sort of pick apart their season like that, but looking at it now and the way they performed, I think they always knew, or they had confidence in their game that, if they played their best footy, that they were always going to be a chance of winning this competition. But, I think there were stages, as you mentioned, through the year where they were battling, and they did their best, to get victories. There was a couple of occasions there where it looked like they were gone in certain matches, but they found ways to fight back and get sort of last ditch efforts to get wins and keep them in that sort of that vicinity of the top four. And really at times it was just the class of a couple of their key position players that got them home. But really, once they had everyone on deck for the grand final on Sunday, and sort of looking at their finals performance, the three matches that they played, they were so good. They were so clinical. And we spoke about this last week with their performance against Cronulla. I still believe that they really just did what they had to do. It was almost like they were conserving energy for that game on Sunday against Melbourne.
Yeah.
Because they knew Melbourne was in, right? Melbourne v Roosters was the Friday night. And so they'd sort of set themselves, they'd geared themselves for that rematch from 2020, and they had something to prove. So I reckon they went out on that Saturday night and just, I think the comment I made last week was that they really didn't look like they got out of second gear against the Sharkies. And so by doing that, they were able to conserve a little bit of energy, get through that grand final preparation, which 14 of their 17 players had played in grand finals before. They were well aware of what the week entailed and what it was all about. So I think that gave them a slight advantage over Melbourne with a less experienced side. And then they come out on Sunday night and just exploded.
Yeah.
They just exploded. And, with looking at, like, the finer parts of their game with, like their line speed, their tackle wins, getting behind the ball on kicks and all this sort of stuff, it was just incredible. They were relentless in all facets of the game.
And their ability to drag teams into their style of footy, it's second to none. Like, I watched that game, and you'd go, if you didn't see the jerseys and the players, you'd be like, is this even the Melbourne Storm playing the Panthers? Because, they didn't really play Melbourne Storm styles of footy. Maybe there might have been 10 minutes where I was like, oh, okay, this is Melbourne footy. But outside of that, it was a game exactly the way Penrith wanted it, which was super grindy, ball in play, dominating through the middle, slowing the ruck down as much as possible, which is good. You're winning the contact by doing that. It was incredible. Who really stood out? Obviously, you've got your Liam Martins, but outside of Liam Martins, who individually really stood out for you for the Penrith Panthers?
Well, I thought Isaiah Yeo was outstanding again. I thought he was super impressive. He got through a mountain of work. I think he finished with about 230-odd running metres. And can be like a lot of his work just goes unnoticed, like the amount of pressure he takes off Cleary and Luai. I thought he was very, very good. Surely he was pretty close to getting Clive Churchill, and not saying Liam Martin shouldn't have got it, because I thought he was very good as well. He come up with a couple of really big moments for the Penrith Panthers. That chase on that kick, which led to a try for Paul Alamotti. He come up with a couple of really big tackles defensively as well. So, he was outstanding. Brian To'o, I know he went off the field early, but he was enormous. Like that stint before he got injured, I just thought he was fantastic for Penrith coming off their own line, and that was always going to be his role, right? It wasn't about scoring tries or getting points for Penrith, but his ability to get the ball off their own try line and take some pressure off his middle forwards, I thought was fantastic. Cleary played a very different game, I thought. He kicked well. He laid on that try for Liam Martin. It was a lovely pass, but it wasn't, for me, it wasn't one of his standout games. I wouldn't say like he played poorly, but he went about his business, nicely and did his job, and it was a brave effort, wasn't it, with that that shoulder injury that he was taking into that game. So, look, they had strong performers all across the park. One guy I'd love to give a huge rap to would be Sorensen.
Yeah.
He missed 4 weeks, didn't he?
Yeah.
Was it 4 weeks, like his last game a month ago, and then he comes out and just plays the absolute house down. And he looked really, really fit for a guy that hadn't played a single game of footy for quite some time. He hadn't even missed a game. So that was really impressive. I just thought as a whole, like they play such a complete team game. It's not all about one or two players in their team to stand out and carry the side. It's they all work together, and they all just get their job done that's needed of them, and that's the result on the weekend. It just, apart from the early try to Harry Grant, it really looked like Melbourne was struggling to get any sort of control of the game.
Yeah. It's really interesting comments on Cleary, because you're right. It's not like he had his typical, 3 try assists and constantly damaging on the edge. But I think, and you can speak more to this much more than myself, but what I find really interesting and exciting about Cleary's game is his ability to identify, it's not really working for me today, so I'm just going to take 30 runs.
Yep.
And he ended up actually running for 212 metres.
Yeah,
and he was almost like an outside back to a degree. Like, I know he was still 7, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I do, mate. No, and that's that's a sign of a quality player, right? Because so the game starts and he recognises, okay, well, they're sending a little bit of extra, heat towards me defensively. And they had to, right? Because he in the 2 semi-finals that he played, like, he absolutely destroyed the opposition, with his ball playing and whatnot. But the Storm most certainly would have had a bit of a target on his back to minimise the impact he had on the game. So that he recognised that early, Okay, so he adapts his game to playing a different style. Where, like you said, mate, I think he did. I think he actually finished with the most runs
Yeah.
out of any Penrith player.
Yep, more than Dylan Edwards. Yeah, 29 runs.
Yep, 29 runs, 212 metres. Like that's that's huge for a half.
The same as Toto. The same as Toto.
Yeah, so same as Brian To'o, but like as I said, mate, he just adapted his role to go. Okay, well this is what I have to do for the side tonight. And shift off a little bit of responsibility to others like Luai and Yoda to do the ball playing.
And just quickly before we head to a break, just to speak about Melbourne, and this is, I want to be extremely clear, this is absolutely no excuses. This is not suggesting that, Penrith couldn't have beaten a more experienced side, but purely from a Melbourne perspective, this is a relatively inexperienced side. Just like the Broncos last year, not just like the Broncos because they fell off a cliff this year, but I believe this Melbourne side will be so much better for that first grand final because they came into this final series the second least experienced side in the whole final series, with only the Bulldogs lower than them. Yeah. And as I said, I'm not suggesting that, that's the only reason Penrith beat them. No, Penrith beat them because they were just outstanding. Yeah. But it is something to take away.
You know what it reminded me a lot of, mate, was actually that 2020 grand final, but in reverse. So, like Penrith come into that grand final in red-hot form, scoring a lot of points against opposition, and then came up against a side, probably not playing that same style of football that they were playing, but just had a bit more experience and at that time of year in that last game.
Yep.
Whereas you look at that the other night, the Storm, they were the ones that were up and running and, they looked faster, they looked more powerful in the lead-up games. But when push come to shove, it was the experience of the Penrith Panthers players in that week and that particular game that knew how to get the job done.
Even, a really good example of that is you look at the wingers for the first half with the Storm, and the game kind of got away from a little bit. And then you look at their second half performances, and Xavier Coates in the second half, he ran for like 170 metres just in the second half. Yeah. And that's experience of, sometimes if you're a winger or an outside back, if you don't get engaged straight away, you can walk off the field. And Xavier Coates only had ran for 60 metres in the first half. Yeah. And so, whereas you look at the Penrith side, To'o had run for 160 metres in the first half. I think just little things like that, massive, massive learning curves for the Melbourne Storm, which I think they'll be better for it. Now, we're going to head to a break. After the break, we've got plenty more to talk about, including more about Storm's performance, Harry Grant's performance, and a little bit about the Penrith Panthers. Harry Grant, 59 tackles, 5 missed, 1 try, 5 runs for 50 metres. I thought, what a captain's knock for Harry Grant, and I think it's an incredible achievement that in his first year of such a high-pressure position, that he leads his team to a minor premiership with 3 weeks to go and to a grand final. Obviously disappointing, but I really felt he built as a leader as the year went on. How did you find his performance, mate?
Yeah, look, it was a strong performance, wasn't it? And going off the back of what I was talking about before around the Storm, after that try, sort of looking like they just struggled to sort of get themselves into the game, and that was always hard for Harry, right? Because they struggled for a bit of play the ball speed. Penrith were fantastic with their defensive movements and controlling the ruck area, and that most certainly would have been a part of the game that they knew that they had to win, because that's the way Melbourne love to play. They love to play that upbeat, sort of up-tempo style of footy where, the middle forwards, they just punch in around that ruck and Harry Grant gets to get out, and that's when he brings the bigger players onto the ball, or he's tipping onto Hughes and Munster, and then all of a sudden there's a bit of chaos happening. So, look, they did a fantastic job to try and minimise Harry's impact on the game. He got away. He got the first try in. He caught them napping on that try line. Cleary got left on the ground. He went to the short side. Liam Martin come up with a missed tackle, and Harry pounced. So he did everything he could really to try and get his team home, but unfortunately it wasn't enough. But as far as his own performance, he never stopped trying. That's a big effort there. 59 tackles, and minimised opportunities with running the football, only the 5 runs. But look, he was sort of everywhere for his footy side. As far as his leadership is concerned, it's his first year as captain. I think he always had that natural, ability to be a leader for the footy club, and hence why he was selected as captain. But I agree with what you said before, Kemby. I think that he really, as the season went on, I think he felt more and more comfortable having the C next to his name because, being a new thing to you at the start of the year, you sort of don't really understand the extra commitments that you have as a captain. There's a lot more going on around commitments with media and sponsors and talking with administration and coaches and all that sort of stuff, where you could probably lose a little bit of focus on what your main role is as a footy player for the team. But there's no doubt that he grew into that role nicely, and he was one of Melbourne's best performers on the weekend.
And in regards to the Melbourne Storm, I guess in the post-mortem, where do you reckon it went wrong?
Look, mate, they didn't. As I said, I didn't feel as though they did a whole heap wrong. It's just they come up against a very, very good side in the Panthers. I'll stand by my comment that if Melbourne played any other team in the competition the other night, they beat them by 20 or 30. I truly believe that. But there was just some moments where I think they may have come up with the wrong play at the wrong time. And what they did was, so they did it. They were doing a very good job of staying in this what's called arm wrestle, right? So the ball's going back and forth, and there was long periods of play with the football in play, no stoppages, and I think both teams really enjoy playing that style of footy. But there was just a couple of moments where I think the Storm come up with a couple of wrong plays. I think we got bundled into touch on play 2 or 3. I think Jerome Hughes took a play 4 kick, a grubber that went into touch towards the end of the game. Just those type of things, mate, where that's the stuff that Penrith want you to do. You know what I mean? They want you to think twice about staying in that grind and then making a sort of decision on the run or off the top of your head, thinking that it's going to result in a big play, but it doesn't. What it does is it ends up being a slightly negative play for your footy side, and it just takes all the pressure off Penrith, heaps it back on yourself, and it sort of takes away the momentum that you've built. That's what Penrith have been so good at. They've been a mile better than every other team at that part of the game is getting into a grind, start building pressure on the opposition, and not letting up until the other team cracks.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this replay right now, and Alec McDonald comes on first run of the game, pumped up.
There's one there, mate. Yeah, exactly.
And it's a nil
first touch and drops it. Yeah. So that's those type of plays where I don't know. I don't know if did that even happen with any Penrith player on the weekend.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think it did.
Yeah. Then you've got Howarth, I think, dropped it early on. Then Pappy kicked it on the full after they scored. I think little things like that in normal season footy and even prelim finals, you can kind of get away with it. But to win a GF, you almost have to be perfect. Like you look back to last year against the Broncos, the Penrith Panthers made one error. So I think as well, if you're making mistakes attacking someone's line, it's a very different mistake to in the middle of the field coming out of your own end. And I think with the Storm, there's nothing wrong with a few errors, especially if you're a bit more of an attacking side like the Storm are. But I just thought the type of errors they were a little bit uncharacteristic for the Storm, where, as I said, like Alec McDonald, just a straight drop. He wouldn't do that. He's been Mr. Reliable all year. But it's a grand final. He's pumped up. He wants to have the biggest run of his life. And that all comes back to experience, I think.
I think the other thing too, mate, that I think has been a little bit underestimated was the absence of Nelson.
Yeah.
So Solomona. I feel as though that was a huge talking point out of the Roosters prelim final, and then those next few days where he was charged and then went up to Sydney and fought the charge or wanted the downgrade and got suspended. I feel as though after the ruling was handed down that the suspension would stand and he was going to miss the grand final, that was it. But you just for a guy his size, he's 6'6", 130 kilos. He's going to leave a huge void in that footy side, and particularly the way they play with. So we spoke about the way Melbourne love to play. They want to play up tempo. They want to play the ball fast. and they want to get Harry Grant out of dummy half. Well, he's their main man to create that momentum. He's the guy that creates a lot of positive opportunities or positive football off of his runs and his play the balls. And just, like the sheer size of him, having him in that footy side, it just makes the opposition sort of, question themselves about where they're going to run and the way they're going to tackle him. And these couple of things, all you need is just that little bit of doubt to create that little bit of doubt in the opposition, and it gives you a slight advantage. And as we just spoke about in grand finals, that's all you need. You just need that slight advantage over the opposition, and that may be all it takes to change the result of a game.
Yeah, it's a great.
Sorry. Yeah, I just think like him not being there, also too, mate. Like when you talk about experience,
He's second most experienced.
Second most experienced player in that Melbourne Storm outfit. He'd played 23 finals games.
Yeah.
Like that's a big blow.
Yeah, it's a great point you make. Obviously it's about what he does with the ball. That's like we all get that. But it's actually about what he brings off the ball when, he runs a lead or he's out the back of something or he's just in the vicinity. That gives the ball runner just that extra half a second because the defence is going, oh, crap, Nelson's in my vision right now. Whereas when you don't have that and you don't have to really worry about a very specific body type, it does change a lot of the way you play. And so, huge loss. And funnily enough, it's almost like if there was one thing you didn't want to lose as a Melbourne Storm forward pack that isn't necessarily the biggest, most explosive pack, it is a big explosive forward. You'd almost rather
the biggest forward in the comp.
Yeah, whereas if you were to lose, let's just say a try-scoring winger, that's almost like, okay, it's not going to be a high try-scoring game anyway, so maybe we could afford to get away with it, maybe. However, a big forward in the middle. But, look, I still think that the Storm, and as you said, I still think they can hold their head high. They worked their absolute backside off. Just wasn't their night. And Penrith were absolutely outstanding. Now, we're going to head to a break. After the break, we've got plenty more to talk about. Are the Penrith Panthers the greatest club side of all time? That was who's in the spotlight for Nelson's Irrigation, teaming up with FX Luminaire to add the wow factor to your garden lighting. Run, we are here for strutties. Look good, feel good, and play your best. 4 straight. Now, discussion has erupted over the past week about the Panthers and where they sit in the pantheon. Great sides, best clubs of all time. You've got the Dragons, 1956 to 1966. They won 11 straight premierships. You've got the Brisbane Broncos, 92, 93. You've got the Raiders, 89, 90, won 2 in a row. You've got South Sydney, won 4 or 5 premierships. You've got Storm in the late 2000 to 2017. You've obviously got the Eels as well. So they won 3 in a row, I think, in the 80s. So plenty of clubs that have done some pretty incredible things. I would love to get your thoughts, Smithy. Where do you rank them greatest side of all time?
Well, just going off the rugby league that I've watched, right, since I can far back as I can remember. Let's just say 1990. They're the best footy side that I've seen. Have to be. To win 4 consecutive premierships, put yourself in 5 grand finals in a row is hard enough. But to win 4 and to win them against some pretty good opposition, that's pretty special. Look, I can't comment on. Obviously, we can't talk about the Dragons. We didn't see that 11 straight, but I don't think that'll ever be beaten. That was done, through mid-60s all the way, mid-50s all the way through the mid-60s. But certainly from as far back as I can remember. So the Raiders that won the comp in 1990, and all the way through. Like, I was a massive Broncos fan. They were a pretty special side. That won back-to-back in 92, 93. Raiders, of course, they went 89, 90, and the 94 premiership also. I was a part of a couple of some good Storm footy sides as well. But this team has just what they've done is unlike any other team for a long, long time. So most certainly in the last 30 years that I've been watching rugby league, they'd have to be the best footy side. Yeah,
I mean, look, obviously, part of a measurement is consistency and their ability to play long seasons. I'm sure you could probably find one-off teams in a one-off game might be able to beat them. But in regards to just greatest of all time where longevity is concerned of basically 4 or 5 years in a row, Like, I believe they're the greatest of all time. And look, I totally agree with you. Like, it's very hard for us to comment on the Dragons of, all those years ago because we didn't watch it. The way I see it, though, is kind of like this, is that the rugby league is open to many more people than it was 40, 50 years ago.
Yes.
So the talent pool is way bigger than it was 50 to 60 years ago. And so although I can't definitively say they're a better side, me personally, I just think with those kind of facts on the side of the Penrith Panthers that they're playing in a league that is open to way more people. So the talent pool is it's probably like 4 times what the talent pool was back then.
Well, when the Dragons, like this isn't knocking the Dragons at all, because I've said before, like you got to say they're the greatest team in the game's history, having won 11 in a row. But in that period, like they were playing, it was a 10-team comp. You know what I mean? So like that backs up what you're talking about as far as the pool of talent that they had to play against. But they had some wonderful players involved in those 11 straight premierships, some legends of the game, some immortals. So, if you're thinking of one-off matches, right? If you're thinking of one-off matches, maybe there are some certain teams out there that could beat this current Penrith side. So when you're thinking of that, you're probably thinking maybe like the Canberra Raiders of 1990 or 94. They were a special side. Broncos 92, 93. Pretty good sides. Maybe a couple of those Storm sides we were talking about, 2017, might be able to knock them off. But as far as achieving what this side has done, 4 in a row, you cannot compare any of those, those sort of more recent sides to them, because, well, for the simple fact, those other sides haven't done what this Penrith team has done, is in winning 4 comps in a row. It's you sort of just got to stop and actually think about what you're talking about. Like, it's easy to say, they won 4 comps in a row, but actually sit back and go, how they've actually gone about that and were able to achieve it. It's just incredible. Yeah. Incredible.
And also the way they've done it. Like, they had the biggest comeback in the history of the modern era, maybe even of the game, in a grand final last year against a red-hot Broncos side. That was just, everyone was peaking at the right time for the Broncos, and they still managed to find a way. And then, they go against a red-hot Storm side this year where you've got a Dally M in 7 and everything's going well, and they still find a way to get the job done. So for me personally, in my opinion, I think they are the greatest rugby league side. When you take everything into account with longevity, consistency, all of that, the people they've lost in the salary cap, I personally believe they are. But that's the beautiful thing about rugby league, is you can debate until the cows come out. We're going to go to how to break.